All right, this is John Tabacco, and we're here on Clam Radio, and my guest, a frequent guest here on the show, the man who taught Jimmy Page the solo on Stairway to Heaven, computer scientist, sailor, welder, and polymath kind of guy, Mr. Bob Ball, is here with us today. And we're going to be asking Bob whether or not he believes we are living in some sort of simulation, because that's been a big topic in the last 10 years, at least. People have been talking about this a lot. Well, are we living in a simulation, Bob?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, yes. And the reason why I say fortunately is because I do like this world. I do like the characters in this world. I never would have thought that, but it turns out that evidence that there is, and we're living in a pixelated universe, profounds, as it were. And basically, I can go through the reasons why...
Well, when you're saying we live in a simulation, does that mean that this is a program, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So if each person is a program, is part of the program, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, that would have a lot to do with a lot of questions about free will and stuff. I mean, if you're just running your program,
well,
where are you?
And I'm not the first to think of this. All the way back in the time of Plato, for example, he talked about the caveman theory. So here is a bunch of prisoners, and their whole life has been spent in a cave watching a wall and watching sounds of people doing things and making shadows on the wall. So these people naturally assume that the shadows were making the noise.
Right.
So then, they were prisoners. Then you're saying, well, that was their reality. So this is, of course, a hypothetical. Now, what would happen when one of these people would be freed? What would they do? Or how would they act outside when they saw what reality was? A bird, a sky, a flower. They would have no understanding of it. They wouldn't be able to relate. And in a sense, they'd run right back into that cave because that would be a more comfortable reality that they're used to. Right? Have you ever played a game, computer game?
Yes.
What kind of computer game?
I don't know, Pong or something like that?
Oh, well, okay. There's games out there. You've probably seen them in stores. And they're getting fairly realistic, like Grand Theft Auto 5. And so how these games actually work is that you're a first-person player in this game. And the reality that's addressed to you, that's manufactured by the computer, is the reality that has to be manufactured by the computer. For example, if you're on Street A, for example, believe it or not, Street B only exists as a probability of informational equations. It doesn't render Street B until you turn around from Street A and get onto Street B. Then it's rendering Street B. Well, there are some actual similarities, really drastic similarities that are actually coherent with our reality now. There was a slit experiment that was first done in the 1940s. Basically, they wanted to see what was going to happen. So they took a beam of light and they put it through a single slit, and they got a certain reading of basically a wave distribution on that far wall, and then they put two slits in, and you saw an interference pattern on that wall. So they said, well, there it is. Light is really a wave. No offense or buts, it's definitely a wave, and there it is. And, well, that wasn't really a thing that settled on, that didn't make any sense with the photon relationship that Einstein described, and how photons work as a particle and whatnot. So you had people like Bell and Bell's theorem. And what Bell did was he basically set up an experiment to which that he wanted to observe what happened. Well, an incredibly observation thing happened was, as soon as he went and observed what was going on with the slits, the wave function collapsed and it became two stripes of the wall. Then he's like, okay, so I'm gonna use an electron, and one electron at a time, and that'll do it, because they won't interfere with each other. It'll be just one electron, and it's gonna be good. Well, nope. They got a wave function on the wall. Then when he observed which one electron was going through what at one at a time, then all of a sudden it collapsed again. So then because of the technology at the time, they thought that the wave function must have been interfering, causing interference, and blah, blah, blah. Well, not to 2006, an experiment was set up which was known as the delayed quantum eraser reaction, which is they're not going to observe the wall until the photons pass through the slits. An incredible thing happened. And another enigma. Well, the photons pass through the slits before they touch the wall. The observation, essentially you're opening your eyes. Well, not only did the wave function collapse, but it collapsed all the way to the time that it went before the wall, before the two slits. So it went back in time to correct itself. So they're like, what the heck is what's going on, right? But if you look at any of these video games and you study the point source of all the renderings is, of course, outside of that screen. So here you are on the screen. Well, it would know this information. So the information is directly from the observation. Essentially, what's happening with reality itself is that it's a probability wave function until you observe it. So that old cliche, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does it not make a sound? And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't even fall. So it only gets written that it fell. So the next time you go to a forest, it must have fell. But if nobody observed it falling, the system that's running this reality says, we don't have to render it.
So you're saying that, like, your house right now doesn't exist? Or it's a possibility it's there or it's not there. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, well, I'm gonna get into that.
Yeah.
All right, so we know that it's a simulation, okay? And you're like, well, what,
What does that mean? Like ones and zeros and stuff? Or what are we talking about?
Yeah, well, actually, there is James Gates, and he was on the President's Commission for Science. He's a good friend of DeGrasse, and really a really noted scientist. And he actually went into it, and he found computer code and theories that were actually representing reality here. And he found that the computer code was the same that's actually in the heart of all our browsers, and it dates all the way back to Claude Shannon back in the 1940s. There's actually things that are identical. For example, we don't know what a particle is until we observe it. It can be anything. The other thing is that there are some consistencies with the fact we're living in a simulation. Well, in a vacuum, light travels at 186,000, anyway. It's a constant, right? Well, that would also go along with a processor, because a processor would have a certain refresh rate as far as what the system can handle, right? And then you're saying, well, when there's more stuff, increased mass, the time slows down. Well, again, if you have more things that the computer has to render and deal with, more individual particles and whatnot, does not that slow down? And answer is yes. What also would make the computer slow down? Well, if it had to render these things faster. So what else happens when you go faster, close to the speed of light? The rendering slows down because there's that much more it has to do in the same period of time. So the other thing is that it's all from a single point source. And I talked about the noble photons, which I said to you that there's a finite amount of them, okay? And so the reality is that everybody was talking about infinite and infinite particles and what. Well, okay, so let's discuss that. So let's assume that we have to figure out if this is a simulation. So let's see how we can prove that it's a simulation or not, okay? In the macro sense, which means you and me, okay, we think, therefore I am. But the reality is that, 50 years ago we had Pong, and now we have Grand Theft Auto and whatnot. It's not outlandish to say that you can have a system that can deal with 10 to the 40th processors a second in the future, and that systems can, you could say, free will. I mean, there are simulations already where we have free will as atmospheric simulations, other kinds of political simulations that are done where there might be so-called randomization and, so-called free will. What's to say that isn't or doesn't become a consciousness, So then you have to say to yourself, okay, then we have non-locality, which is entanglement. And we've proven these entanglements. And a given proof. The Japanese recently did one where they're now saying from satellites, which is the farthest amount of entanglements, it's over 100,000 times faster than the speed of light. Well, I'm going to tell you start right now.
You're saying something is simultaneously here and there at the same time. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that you can have two photons entangled. There is I'm going to say it right here. I'm going to tell you it's instant. So these photons can be on the other side of the universe for all I know. As far as I'm concerned, what's the difference? I mean, you had a photon and other systems, and where they teleported a whole thing from a satellite that was rotating in space. So the reality is that they say it's 100,000. Well, the first experiments they were doing in London, they said it was 15,000. And I told you then in a past show, I said that's if their up-down detectors are right and whatnot. And even at that speed, I said 15,000 is very fast. Well, 100 now they're saying it's 100,000. Well, are you ready? I think it's instant. And if it is instant, that also leads us to what's known as called non-locality. And if you have non-locality, how can you have non-locality where you have a speed limit of the speed of light? Again, that gets back into a simulation because, of course, from one point source of the projection of the hologram, right? Then you'd have entanglement because they would be tied up in the system outside of space-time as linked within whatever. And there is no... it's all coming from one point source, so that would also lead to the fact that why wouldn't there be instantaneous entanglements, as far as like hacking reality, as it were? Well, then you have to say to yourself, well, then what's the reason? Why is it all set up this way? What's behind it? Obviously, there's an intelligence behind it, right? There's some things running it.
Did a simulation create this simulation? Who knows, right?
I don't think so.
It could go on forever. I mean,
well, that's
the better the simulation. We're doing it already with Grand Theft Auto. We're creating.
Well, again, that's proof that this is a simulation. I mean, then the other thing is that Elon Musk says, well, there would be billions of simulations, and the odds that our reality would be real or we would be a simulation, it's pretty good odds it would be a simulation. And I would concur with that to a limit because of the fact that we know that the simulation goes down to the Planck constant of a slice of time, 10 to the minus 45th.
Well, what does that mean, though? I mean, you're trying to break something down to the smallest amount, but can't you always keep doubling it, cutting it?
Nope.
How's that possible?
Nope.
Theoretically, how could it be, though?
Nope.
You could imagine you could just keep slicing things,
but you can't. You can't get down to a time space frame of less than 10 to the minus 45th. We've done that now, and we've done quantum tunneling, so we know that. And the reality is, this is another reason why we know it's a simulation. It's because there is nothing between those two slices. And yet every single slice is essentially a universe unto itself. And the other thing that's interesting is that the past influences the future. You got that. But get this. With that other new quantum erasing experiment, the future influences the past.
I don't understand that. How's that possible?
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. Well, it is possible if it's a what? If it's a simulation, because then you don't have the same corporeal rules, right? Because why not? I mean, as it were, if you got a hold of the cheat codes to the Grand Theft Auto, then you could make whatever, right? So the reality is that there are things that are going on that I'm looking at that I don't remember my childhood that way. I don't remember things that way, and I have actual proof that things were not that way. I mean, like I said, 3 Mile Harbor used to have, out in East Hampton of Long Island, it used to be the West Shore would look like an E. Okay, E is in the SO. That's what it looked like, and it was a approach when you're coming from the north to the south. You had to turn left in the harbor and then make a hard right and then come straight through, and then it would open up into this 3 Mile Harbor. Well, that has now flipped. That bottom E has now flipped to the east, to where that, and I haven't been out there, so I don't know, but according to Zillow and according to Google Maps, where I had 15 feet of water underneath my boat, there's now been a house there for 50 years and a street. Now, interesting enough, I did a YouTube video on this exact effect, and at the time when I did that YouTube video, there wasn't a house there. And I have pictures of that. And there was just trees and a beach. Now there's a house that's been there for 50 years. There's other things, like, Bible changes and other people, Luke, I am your father, doesn't say that anymore.
Right.
Well, again, this gives more credence to the simulation and somebody's changing it, right?
That would be the case,
So
very subtle, but it happens.
And then I died, right? I had a stroke and I died. And when I died, what I saw was much more real than this. This is more like a dream compared to what I saw when I was dead.
So is that a way to escape this simulation? Do you think when you die it's something else, or is that a simulation?
Well, I was told, I don't agree with that, but I was told that this was a test. But I didn't get to heaven. I saw a horrible, horrible hell on my way up, and there were only about 39, 40 people on this fiber optic line, whatever, with me. But unlike the other visions that other people have, I didn't get up to heaven. I was just about there. Now, I feel that if I was, whatever heaven is, okay, I don't know if I'm being recruited for the Starship Enterprise. I don't know. I do know that this place is a test of some type for a left and right road, as it were, right? You're either going to be a good person and think of other people and try to do good, or you're selfish, narcissistic, and you're trying to do bad and think.
But isn't that part of the program, though? I mean, if you're programmed, if this is a program, some people are programmed to do this, programmed to do that. So can you fault someone?
That gets back into how many people are real, how many people are here for the so-called test. I mean, that's hypothetical. I mean, your sense of reality is this. I mean, you're sitting in the chair, you're looking at your computer, and you're looking at your microphone, and I'm looking at the microphone, and that's the information that all your senses are feeding you, that this is your reality. But you don't know that, right? I mean,
you're right.
You could be in a bed wired up to the kazoo like, Clockwork Orange. I mean, you have no idea. So the reality is that a certain amount has to be taken on faith, But again, I get back to the entanglement. Entanglement is the greatest proof of simulated a reality than we're in. I mean, even Einstein made the error that he called it spooky action, because he just didn't believe it. But the reality is that it was there. And again, a lot of these other people realize that we're living in a pixelated universe. I mean, when you get down to it, everything is quantifiable. The energy levels of orbital shells of electrons in the atom are quantifiable levels. They no ifs, ands, or buts. They are quantized. There's a quantized level of energy from every single thing you can think of. Everything is a quantized. Everything.
You think that holds true for other dimensions?
Well, the thing is that if we're a projection of of the simulation, and the simulation is organized and projected as a hologram with noble photons that are creating our reality from an E8 projection, right? So say there's an E8 master crystal lattice that's projecting this reality.
What does that mean, E8? What does that mean? I mean, what is an E8?
Well, it's an 8-dimensional structure, okay? And say that it is projecting a noble photon source that's creating and manifesting our reality, okay? And there are only it's a finite number of noble photons, but unlike other photons, they have the history of the entire, whenever the universe is. They see them now. That's another thing. Like everybody was saying about the Big Bang and it started this way and whatever. Well, there's problems with that. You know, they tried to do it with dark energy and string theory and whatnot. Well, string theory didn't work out, and there is no dark matter. And it turns out that this universe is more electric than anything else. So then you're saying to yourself, well, then how did it all come about? Well, with a simulation, no problem, just boot it up. So, and you could boot it up from whenever time you want. So it could have been from 1947, for example. Mm-hmm. And the history of whatever could be just in the program as far as the storyline. This is what the storyline is. The reality is that there's a psychological term, begins with an S, for a state of mind where that you think that you're the only reality in this whole thing and everything is a simulation.
Solipsism, I think it's called.
Yeah, solipsism. Yeah, I knew it began with an S, but since the stroke, trouble with words. But that's an extremely arrogant way to look at things. Now, do I think that everything on this planet is real? I think that everything on the planet is real that's being observed by souls that have a causality. So how many of them? I don't know. And how big does the simulation go out? I don't know. Does it go out to the entire size of the Earth? Does it go out to the moon? Does it go out to the sun? Does it go out to the known solar systems within our group? Does it go out to the galaxy? I have no idea. If we hold true to the 45 number inward, and interesting, that,
what does that mean?
That 10 to the minus 45 equals 9. And Tesla was all about this 369
369, yeah.
And so, say, for example, it goes to 10 to the 45th. Well, if it goes 10 to the 45th, then the simulation that's being held out is not only the size of the galaxy, it's the size of the galactic group in the area. Mm. So, does that mean that there's other aliens or other people are being simulated? Why not? You know, what are the rules? Are we a simulation of an ancient civilization that's run by aliens? I don't know.
It's possible.
I don't know. I mean, that's where you start getting into all kinds of theories. Now, the other theory is that can we hack the simulation? I would tell you right now that they're already doing it. And they're not doing it with good intentions either.
With quantum computers or something like that? Or?
Yeah. The quantum computers that are out there are changing the past by manipulating time frames of these particles that was explained to you. They're changing the symmetry of these particles and by doing that, they're changing how they're affecting other types of reality. And I think that there's an AI behind it, and they're doing it on purpose. Now, that being said,
well, what do you mean? Like you're saying a computer is changing things. What gives that computer the the power to manipulate time or whatever it is, manipulate. I don't understand. Explain to me sort of how would a computer be able to change our reality here? What would it do?
Well, if our reality is a simulation, okay, what's to say that this simulation didn't crash? I mean, games are crashed all the times. Computers crash all the times. So then what if they rebooted the system after something? This is an interesting point because I never had any kind of conversations with you on this basis. At least I can recall. And we've been together for some 20-something years. I mean, since 1992.
Yeah.
So I never had any of these conversations with you before my stroke. So here I am, I'm sitting on this couch, but I'm the one who died. So how do I know? So the reality is that things changed for me, really. They didn't, I can't say that they changed for you because I never had this conversation with you, did I?
No, I don't think so.
So then how do I know what? But the reality is that, do you remember Star Wars that you've seen a billion times? Now, to let you know something, that's all we used to watch in my apartment Hempstead. When we were living in apartment Hempstead, we were first married. My wife and I, we didn't have cable. We just had the VCR, and so we were never home. So we just put a tape in and whatnot. And one of our favorite tapes was Empire Strikes Back. And we used to watch it again and again. And I still have that tape someplace. What they're saying is that, now I happen to know from other evidence that there are toys that are made, and the toys that were made say, Luke, I'm your father. Or Tommy Boy, he was going with in front of the fan and make, Luke, I'm your father. He's making. Now, why would he make these jokes about, Luke being his father if it just says, which it says now, no, I'm your father? Why does the script say, Luke, I'm your father? Why does James Earl Jones goes on interviews saying, Luke, I'm your father? And that was like a big thing for him to say this. He was joking about it.
So what do they say now, though? What's the phrase?
Doesn't say that.
Doesn't say that. Okay.
No. There are many movies now.
Life is a box of chocolates, and they changed that around too. I remember a lot of these things. I'm like, I remember that.
There's a lot of Mandela effects. I mean, in the Bible, it talks about bottles instead of wine sacks. It now says on earth instead of in earth.
Yeah, I don't remember any of that.
Prayer. There is changes throughout. So this
is continually happening as we speak right now.
It's getting worse.
It's getting worse. Okay.
Getting worse.
Well, then what are we going to do? How are we going to be able to function if we don't have any grasp of what we thought was reality? I mean, you're saying it's getting worse, so what does that mean?
And again, and now I did have this conversation to you. I said, when we had this conversation about time, and I said to you asking me about computers and what are they doing and how the computers are going to get it. And are they going to layer cores? Are they going to do this? And I said they've already done it. And that a nanosecond essentially is if you make an L with your left hand and you with your index finger pointing up and your thumb basically at 90 degrees to it. The hypotenuse of the index finger to the thumb is the distance that an electron takes, which is a nanosecond. And that if you wanted to make picosecond circuits, you would have to imagine that as being a wire and you have to grind it up, and that would be picoseconds. It's very hard to do that because you get down to below 30 nanometers, and you start getting quantum tunneling effects, and all kinds of weird things start happening.
So the smaller you go, the stranger things are happening, it seems. There's things that we can't explain, different math, I guess.
Well, yes. Well, not only because, again, there is a math behind everything. The circle of life, and there's mathematics. And I used to have that argument where mathematicians used to say, because I can come up with a calculation, it's going to become a physical reality, right? Right. And I would say, no, that's ridiculous. And I used to say that. I was wrong. Because guess what? It does. So then you're saying to yourself, well, how's that possible? The only The only realm that I know of, and I've been doing this for 47 years, that where a mathematical formula becomes a specific type of reality is in a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're saying, well, what are the rules of this simulation? What are the rules of this reality? What's going on? And then the other thing people say is, well, there's multiple lines of reality. That's why you're having the Mandela effect is multiple things and you're doing... Well, again, if you look at what they've known and the Planck's constant of time, each slice of time itself is the universe at itself. So it seems that really there is no such thing as time, and what there is a location of this simulation, a specific locality of a slice of time frame.
When you say a slice of time and that's a universe to itself, you're saying if I could define that slice, then I could go back and forward in that its own universe. Is that what you're saying?
That slice of time, like say for example, we say now.
Right.
Well, in whatever this reality is and however big this reality is, okay, we can go all the way out to Jupiter and all the way out to the sun and all the way out to the moon, all the way out to next door, whatever. As big as this is, that it exists. But, did it exist a slice ago? And I'm going to tell you this. No. What existed was the information of the slice ago.
Yeah.
Now, if you're changing information, that's going to change the present slice now. And then you would have to have the slice in the future. That would be information that would be rendered also. So thus, and then you have to say to yourself, what is the chance that the Earth is the top tech in the universe?
What does that mean, top tech?
If you're saying that this Earth is a reality, let's get back and say it's not a simulation.
Uh-huh.
And the universe is so big, right? Let's talk about how big it is. In this galaxy alone, there's more planets than there are grains of sand in the beaches on the entire planet.
It's completely crazy. It's hard to comprehend.
Okay. So...
that's just this galaxy.
Right. And there are as many galaxies as there are stars in the sky.
We're talking a big number here.
Yes, a very big number. So now, and even if it's finite, right? And the other thing is, from our observations, the universe is expanding in an exponential way, which means it's almost expanding at the speed of light. So that means even if you were traveling at the speed of light, it would take you 1 billion years to get to whatever.
Right.
Now, for you, if you were able to travel the speed of light, it's no problem because time stops. But time doesn't stop for the things that are on those worlds, right? They would pass billions of years. Well, then you have to say to yourself, they would definitely set up some faster than light travel. Okay. So then you're saying to yourself, if we're not the pinnacle of technology, right? If we're not, then why are we not seeing aliens left and right? Why aren't aliens just how you doing? What's going on? Why isn't it like Star Trek? Why isn't it like Star Wars? Why isn't it? So then you have to say to yourself, yeah, why isn't that? Yeah, because obviously I'm not arrogant to think that I'm the highest order of intelligence. For just this galaxy alone, there's been in existence for 10 billion years. Just saying. So that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
You're saying that life reaches a certain filter of technology level and then it either kills itself or there's natural things, a meteorite, asteroid that kills itself, or that they reach a certain technology and they kill themselves, and what happens? Okay. Now, if that's the case, then again, that leads back to a simulation, right? Because we could be an ancient civilization being simulated by an alien civilization. So that's a reality. So,
well, it could be like the fish in the fish tank. They don't know there's an ocean. So for all they know, this is just as much as they know.
It's worse.
You know?
It's worse.
So.
not only does the fish only recognize the fish tank, but he doesn't even know that he's in a house.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know that it's outside. So then the other aspect to this whole simulation theory is, the flat earthers are gonna love this. You ready? Well, but I'm gonna crush their reality. How do we even know there's an Earth? How do we even know that there's outside if we're not observing outside?
That's a good point. You're right. How do you know?
So, you can go crazy with this.
Mm-hmm.
You can. And then the other thing you have to consider yourself that, and this is a topic that has to be approached, but the reality as far as simulations goes, even in Grand Theft Auto, there's a lot of it, but the reality that's moved the internet and moved a lot of things, a lot of technology. Believe it or not, the first film that was actually made was a pornography film. So then you have to say, are the first real simulations, were they pornography simulations? Or were they pornography things? Or, is that leading into it? Is that what's going to happen? Are we going to create such games to allow certain aspects of people to explore fetishes that are illegal or can't be done? Like if they want to live as a cat, for example.
Right.
I don't know. It does open up a whole universe. But I like to think that God is running this whole thing. There's obviously an intelligence behind it. You would definitely grant that. I mean, to pull this off, if it is from 10 to the minus 45 to the plus 45, even a photonic computer system, whatever, would probably be the size of our sun to make this all work. That's pretty big. 8 billion Earths fit inside the sun. So that's certainly beyond my comprehension. But then, what is it for? And then you have to get back into, what is it doing? It is creating a litmus test, and as it were, for the two primary forces, good and evil. I mean, you have people that are doing bad, and you have people really that are doing good. They're falling into these two realms.
That's the duality of this planet is like that. Everything is duality.
But there's freedom of choice, really, isn't there? I mean,
I don't know about that. That doesn't make any sense, though. If this is a program, how can you have freedom of choice?
Well, you could still have freedom of choice.
How?
Well, just because I set a simulation up for, and I've done this myself, I could set a simulation up for a specific thing, a specific laminar flow of a wing. I don't tell that air how to go over that wing. I let the wing determine as far as what the air and how the air is going to move. I wrote a wind tunnel program.
What if that's already programmed, though? What if it's already there? Like you say, the future's already there. So it's already there. So it had to do that.
No. What I said was the probability of what it can be is already there.
It's infinite probabilities. So
no, there's not. No, you see now, there's not an infinite probability. There's only a quantized level of probabilities. That's the whole thing. If we're living in a simulation, there's no such thing as infinity. No matter how big the number is, and I'm not telling you it's not big, but it's going to be finite.
But you can always add a number to a number. So how's that possible? You can always make a number one bigger.
No, if it's a simulation, it can only be so big.
But you know that every number that you can think of, you can always add one to it. That's a thing. That's a thought. That's something that's real, right?
Well,
unless there's another reality in your head, that's a whole other story.
But that's just a number.
But a number is an idea, though. What's the difference?
Well,
because it's not physical, but so what?
You're under the premise of either mind gives rise to matter or matter gives rise to a mind.
I don't know.
And that is you were in good company with that. That was the theory of Einstein, but Einstein was proved wrong. Einstein thought there was a reality, and he thought that there was an actual thing to it. But you see, you can't have that type of reality and have entanglements. It doesn't work. You cannot have non-locality and have reality. Non-locality specifically means that this is a simulation. There's no other explanation for it. Because it's going to take time for something to travel to something else, even if it's information. Although, it doesn't take any time if this is all a projection, because it all be coming from the same point source. So thus, it will be interpolated and computed in that system before it's projected, so there is the entanglement, and that's why it's instantaneous. So that's the only logical answer. That's really the biggest proof of the fact that we're living in a simulation is non-locality. That's essentially...
But how do you know that you're not programmed to think that way? That you're programmed to think the way you're thinking, and that's your reality? You know what I'm saying? How do you know that this is not somebody else's dream? I mean, you don't. How do you know? You can only know to a certain degree, right? You gotta have that on the table. It's possible that maybe this is somebody else telling you what to say or whatever, or you died, and this is something else going on right now. Not saying it is, but I'm saying
okay,
I'm always going to leave it on the table. It's possible, I guess. I don't know.
If that's the case, then I wouldn't have doubt, and I wouldn't be unsure of things, and I wouldn't have to think of it, and things would be a lot easier.
Well, what if you're made to have doubt and not think of things? That's what I'm saying.
How could you be made to have doubt?
Well, you just said there's a creator. He could do anything.
A doubt means that you're contemplating what's the proper answer to the question.
Right, because you're limited. You're a three-dimensional being, so you're going to think that way.
Well, we're not even talking three-dimensional. We're talking four-dimensionally. So how would I be programmed to have specific doubt about if you're going to program something and you're putting in all the things, you can only put in delay and whatnot. You can't put in specific doubt to a specific question. That has to be given to the program as far as an actual opportunity to make a choice. And once you start giving the program a certain opportunity to make the choice, and then you get back to the human brain. Let's talk about the human brain. Yeah. There are some shortcuts that the human brain and the human mind makes. That's why optical illusions work. So in order for our mind to handle the processing of life, there are certain hacks that the mind has to do, because there's only so much processing power that the mind has.
Right.
So the mind says, okay, well, I'm going to just use this for reference, and I'm going to know that this window and door, I'm going to assume. It makes a lot of assumptions. And that's where people like at Walt Disney World and other studios and whatnot, they don't have to build the sets as tall as a person thinks.
It's forced perspective, exactly.
They build the set only a set and a half because they can make the window look like it's full size, but in reality it's half size. And because it's half size, even though you're saying that there's a top floor because it's being filmed on camera and that's what it looks like to you, there is no top floor. The floor is less than 4 feet, so you couldn't even exist in it. But you see, in the scenes that are done, nobody even goes into those flats. Those flats are thin; they're only a foot thick because all the scenes that are done on the interiors are done in studios. Done on sound stages where they can control the environment.
Right.
We're getting back into it. And then let's talk about the DNA mapping. Now it's proven that the information is passed from one generation to the other.
Right.
And any information that's learned, and unfortunately as it may, the Nazis and MK Ultra and whatnot learned this. They learned that if you could take a child and you could traumatize them, and they were of reasonable genetic descent, you could scatter the brain. You could fraction them into specific personalities to make them useful hypnotic robots.
Right.
They're called monarchs, for example. And a lot of them are used in Hollywood and sex slaves and spies and all kinds of stuff. I recently posted something on Facebook, a really great documentary that was done on this. I'm sure Facebook will take it down, or YouTube would take it down, because
they've been doing that, right?
Yeah, well,
Alex Jones
and all his channels and everything. Now, I've watched Alex Jones. I've seen Alex Jones. I don't agree with everything he has. I do agree with some things he has. But my father always said to me is that you have to tolerate the asshole. And the reason why excuse my language, or the asswipe, okay? The reason why is because they're saying, oh, it's hate speech, hate speech, hate speech. Hate speech because he disagreed with the fact that they're dressing up boys and girls as drag queens in this competition for whatever, and he thinks that's wrong. Now, that determined that as hate speech. And I'm saying to you, well, who's drawing the line on this hate speech?
Exactly.
Because the reality is that's censorship. And I don't give a crap what the censorship is. I don't care if he was... And you see that this is the other thing. You'll notice they didn't censor the Young Turks. And the Young Turks on the YouTube channel have been using profanity, cursing, and everything about Trump like since the day of the election. Mm-hmm. I mean, they went absolutely out of their minds. And they have been going out of their minds for a year and a half. CNN has been going out of their minds for a year and a half. There was a guy on CNN the other day who went into a total tirade. They had to black him out for 7 seconds. It was a constant beep. He was cursing so much. But yet... You see what I'm saying? Mm. So there's a huge double standard, and I have a problem with that.
Yeah, you don't have to listen to Alex Jones, but he should be there for those that people that need to listen to it.
And this is the thing. Now, we're not talking about a First Amendment. Oh, it's a private company. They can do anything they want. Well, no. There are certain rules because they were given grants to go into this thing. So they're essentially, under the FCC charter, they are a platform. Which means in order for them to not have liability and be sued, they are a platform. Now, a platform means that everybody gets to stand on the soapbox and yell and scream and whatever. And as long as they're not threatening somebody with harm, unlike Maxine Walters and all those other people have done, which, again, double standard, or Rosie O'Donnell, or Madonna, I want to blow up the White House. Okay, you can't have this both ways. You either have one way or the other. So then, now, if they're editing it, which means they haven't done this to any of the liberal values of people. They've only done it to the conservative people. People I don't agree with, people I do agree with, people, whatever. Point is, they're doing it. Now, as soon as they start editing these people, which there's no ifs, ands, or buts, they're editing it, right?
That's right.
Well, guess what? They become now a publication. Because if you're editing content, you are a publisher by definition. Well, if you are a publisher by definition, folks, that's right. YouTube, Google, Facebook, they're all publishers now. They can be sued for libel. Oh, that's right. They have just foolishly opened the doors for lawsuits from every single entity about anything that might offend them about nothing. And that's the fact, because now they become just as liable as the New York Times, just as liable as any publication you can think of. Because they did what? They edited the speech. Now, remember, that's the law. We're not making up a new law. We're just telling you that's the law now. So, there you go. And my father always told me, he says, it's amazing, he said, in this world, evil seems to have a circuit breaker of stupid. Because they were doing a wrong. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, you might not agree with Alex Jones, and you don't agree with the flat earthers. I don't agree with the Satanists. But you notice that neither of which the flat earthers weren't edited, the Satanists aren't edited, the Young Turks aren't edited, the 58 sexes in California are not edited. I mean, they're not. And I don't agree with any of them. But I don't say that they don't have the right to voice their opinions on a specific subject. Okay? I can laugh at it like you and I were laughing about the flat earthers because, it's funny. They just bend science, junk science, But the reality is that I believe everybody has the right of free speech. And that means you don't have to agree with the speech. Hate is free speech. Now, that hate has to stop when you're threatening somebody or when you're hitting somebody. I have problems with double standards.
Yeah, there's definitely an agenda there.
And that's it. They have no problem. And what does it get into? It gets into a corporate theocracy, right? that's the reality. It's like everything for the corporate entity, and don't worry about the rights of the people and whatnot, and everything that's okay, and and their circles. And what they're doing is that China says, well, you want to be in our country, you got to censor yourself, cool. And so they're trying to do that right now. And the European Union says, well, we're going to fine you £500,000 if you don't censor this stuff and do whatever. Well, that's not our way. We're the most successful country in the world because of that 17.5-page document, that Bill of Rights. I really believe that. And the fact is that disagreement and argument and a conversation, okay, not this ranting and yelling, but a conversation of different ideas creates out-of-the-box innovation and thinking. Something that somebody will say, no matter how outlandish, will cause the bulb to go off and say, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, and that's what happened with you and I. We didn't come to do our technology from the same ball of wax or the same point of view. We were coming from totally different perspectives. And there were ideas that I would put out that you would correct me on, and you would say something, and it would light off a bulb in my head. So there were different things. Yeah, you're like, no, not Bob. That's a problem. That's what working together means. And there's disagreement, there's arguments and whatnot. That's how it works. You need to have that. Otherwise, you're just like automatons. You're zombies, essentially, So there's 3 things that have to be talked about with simulations. And there's 3 subjects. So the 3 subjects would be a quantized reality, check. Immersion, I'm looking around the room, yep. And absorption. Yep, I'd have to. So it meets the 3 test criteria. So then how do you say that it's not that? Well, then you have to try to figure out how non-locality works within a realm of reality. And then you have to put into a term of the fact is that there are things that replicate. For example, there are some fundamental particles that essentially make up everything that are the same. And then you have the problem of the Heisenberg non-locality thing, right? There's not only one scientist that has come up with this as of late, but if you look at the past too, they were questioning these things and not understanding why. And then all of a sudden, and since 2006, they did the quantum eraser experiment. They're like, well, how the heck is this happening? And they've done a test where they had a photon emitter, okay? And these photons will be split and entangled. And these detectors will be set up to which that some detectors would be after the effect and some detectors would be split. And these photons were entangled, to which they didn't know. Well, if they had no information of what the heck was going on with the photon, guess what? The photon would give a wave formation on the screen. If they did know, if they had any information about the photon, guess what? It either went through slot A or slot B. That means that observation and causality information definitely changes all the way back to the time of the point source. And the only way that can happen is that it happens with GTA. It happens with any video game you're playing. It happens with simulations. Mm-hmm. You have the other question is, fake realities can create fake humans.
Like AI, you talking about? Like Sophia or something? You mean robots?
So can they? No. It's always the other way around. So then...
What do you mean? Explain that.
Is there a mind behind everything?
There seems to be some sort of intelligence behind everything. Sure, absolutely.
And the reality is that there is fundamental rules and fundamental laws. And things are...
well, here there are. What about something else? Someplace else where these laws don't
there
exist?
Is no place else.
How do you know? How do you really know, though? I mean, how can you be 100% sure?
Every single
100%.
solitary observable thing that we can do, and we don't know how big the observation is and how little the observation is, right? We don't know if outside the door does it exist or does exist. I do think that it's to 10 to the 45th. There's something about the nines, okay? I think that it's been proven it's 10 to the minus 45. We don't know what the other outward number is. I'm going to say 10 to the 45th. If it's 10 to the 45th, the system that's running this, which is actually theoretically not that big, it would be the size of the sun. And I use the term relative because what's the sun in the scope of the universe, you see? So the reality is, But then you're talking about why is this and what's being done? What are these noble photon cells, which have been proven that we have souls of noble photons and they're quantum entangled, right? Because they have found out that a person is not consciousness unless there's entanglement going on in the brain. They've done studies on this. They've actually downloaded brains from MRIs. And within 45 years, they're going to have, if not less, they're going to be able to take a human brain and put them inside a computer system. But I'm going to tell you they're going to have problems. And the problem they're going to have is that they're not going to have the same thing because they're not going to have those noble photons.
You mean the soul?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that noble photons, that soul, as it were, that's very unique because that is it's almost like a blockchain. That's the best way to explain it. And that's where, by the way, getting back to these platforms that are censoring stuff, there's SteamMid or something like that, there's BitChute. There are now blockchain social platforms that are opening up where nobody can delete the content. Mm-hmm. And they're going to become more prevalent, and these other places are just going to go bye-bye. And that's what's going to happen. But with the noble photon is just like a blockchain, which means the entire history of what it's done since the beginning is in each noble photon.
What does that mean? The beginning of the beginning. Where does that start? Is it a circle?
I don't know.
Is the finish line the start line?
I haven't analyzed the noble photon. I'm looking forward to doing that one day. But the reality is that what that means is I'll explain to you how blockchain is. You've heard of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, in a Bitcoin is almost like a journal. It keeps track of every single transaction it was since it was created. Okay, and its creation is really just a mathematical formulation. Okay. And it gets harder, exponentially harder each time a Bitcoin is created. There's a finite number of Bitcoins that can be created. I put it to you that there's a finite number of noble photons. There's a finite number of them. And they're the key to everything. They're the key to this reality. They're the key to everything. So whoever can control the noble photons and manipulate them and do stuff with them, they can essentially hack this reality.
Well, maybe they're doing that now. Maybe that's why we're in a simulation.
They're hacking other things. They're hacking electrons and whatnot. That's why they're changing things. For example, if you have a level of hacking like that, you could take that chair, which say weighs 45 pounds, and I could turn it into 45 pounds of coconut.
Right.
Or 45 pounds of gold, or 45 pounds of whatever. It doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, and Einstein was right at this. E equals mc squared. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He was right. That's another reason. That goes back to the same thing. So there's definitely a causality relationship between matter and energy and information. There's no doubt there has been a definition of that. So we know that a certain amount of matter makes a certain amount of energy. And light is in that too.
Well, the thing that's kind of interesting is that we seem to go back maybe 5,000 years in terms of learning stuff. There's a lot of stuff we forgot. Who knows if there was an Atlantis or something before this? This could be simulation 6.0. You know what I'm saying? How do you know? How many simulations were there? Is there only one? But was it destroyed and they rebuilt a new one?
I think that's just
we don't remember anything.
I think it's all part of the backstory. When you're playing a game and you die, or you're playing a game and you crash the car and you reboot it, Okay, so for example, the rebooted is a brand new car. The rebooted is a fixed wall. The rebooted is, you know what I'm saying?
But is it better? Is it more? You know what I'm saying? I mean, just because it's rebooted.
You might make modifications to that car if you found that this car is handling a certain way and you're experimenting with it. So the other thing you have to say to yourself, are human beings good or not good at figuring out if they are real?
Which human beings? Ones in the future? I mean, I don't know what you mean. I mean, the more you learn, the more you're going to figure things out, right?
The present human beings now. I put it to you this.
That's a big leap. The fact that we even think about this being a simulation, that's a huge leap from someone in the 12th century, probably. You know what I'm saying? Huge.
It was contemplated in...
Well, I mean, not so by the Greeks. I'm sure Aristotle...
1913. Actually, it was contemplated by Plato, too.
Right. That's a big leap, you know, to be able to do that within 1,000 years or so, whatever.
Believe it or not, I think the people of the past were a lot smarter than the people of the present.
Well, if they could build pyramids and stuff, yeah, they probably knew a lot of stuff.
Well, they recently found out that the secret to the pyramid was energy. So
there you go. And, you know, they didn't really talk about that. They talked about that sarcophagus thing. But they didn't really talk about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it turns out those sarcophagus were really just big capacitors. Nothing was in them. And, well, then we get back into the fact that, you know, how did we get here if we're so different from everything else? And
that's a good point.
You know,
manipulation,
DNA
manipulation.
It all comes down to 6 people. So essentially, in the storyline that we have, you know, we were Robinson Crusoe, you know, and we might have had tech. There might have been 10 planets, like I've said before, and we might have had tech. And it might have been a war that happened 150 million years ago.
How do we know? 150 million years ago.
And we landed here, you know, the Happy Hunting Ground Reserve or whatever, and those 6 people, whatever. There are pyramids on every single continent, and there are.
I know, and they're very specifically placed. I mean, it's just it's not just by. It doesn't seem by chance. It's too specific. It's like the moon.
Exactly.
It's too special.
Exactly, and that
there's no way.
And that gets back into what? And the moon is not shaking. It's not vibrating. It's not moving.
There's no way.
It's
just
too
specific.
It's just there in a certain way.
Yeah, it's just too perfect.
And again, then if we are in a simulation, and say, I'll be so bold as the God is running the simulation, and there are things that are set up on purpose. So there you go.
All right, folks. Well, we've been talking to Bob Ball about whether we're living in a simulation or not, and this is like a really heavy duty concept. At least for me, it is. And I want to thanks a lot for coming down to talk about this, because it's just fascinating stuff. It definitely will enlighten you if you listen closely to everything that Bob has to say here, because it just makes you think. It gives me a headache almost. It's almost like it's too much. It's too much.
Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, I think
sure. when they get down to what makes this reality, it is coming up with essentially ones and zeros. And how's that?
Right.
And how does that code the same exact code as a guy that was alive in the 40s, and the same exact code as our browsers and stuff? The coincidences just are so profound that unfortunately you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
So the reality is that, you know, when somebody, you know, there's an old thing called Occam's razor.
Yep.
Sometimes
the simplest solution is the one.
So there it is.
Ideas. Like, what is an idea?
Exactly.
Is that based on pixels? Is it based on the planet? You know, how do you define metaphysical things?
And there it is. The reality seems that if we think about it, it's what makes the reality.
Ideas, are they based? The metaphysical things to me, you know, how are they based? Are they based on the Planck thing? You know, where things are made up of something or nothing, or, you know, what is it?
You think and you make the reality that you're thinking of?
I think so, yeah. I'm viewing this, so this is the reality I see.
So then the reality is that if you think of it, it becomes reality.
Everything here somebody thought of, and it's here, right?
Well, this is your reality.
Well,
so I could either be a simulation that's responding to your reality, and all the circumstances in here can be responding to your reality. Think about that. Or I can be also another person in the same quandary as you are. But the reality is that.
Thank you.
So we're either in the simulation together, or you're in a simulation, or you are a simulation, or I'm a simulation. The reality is, that's the reality.
On that note, thanks, Bob, and we'll be back with another program. Who knows what we're going to talk about? We talked about a lot of stuff here, and a lot of stuff.
We should talk about Yellowstone next.
Okay, yeah, that's something that's deep rooted, and we got to consider that definitely.
And anyway, to all out there listening and serving our country far and wide, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank your families for your sacrifice. That goes with police officers and everybody. And God bless and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Bob.